Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and this is Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. Now, you haven't heard that in a while. That's, of course, my podcast series that was on for two and a half years. Quite historic. I mean, it covered all of the election of 2024, the election dispute, January 6th, and then all the things that happened after that. And then we went to doing America's Mayor live in the evening between 8 and 9. And now we also do the Rudy Giuliani show between 7 and 8. I didn't leave a lot of time to do the podcast, but I do think these are important because we can go into a little more depth, and we're going into a little more depth on something that is of crucial importance right now, and that's Iran. And the some of the information that should be known by everyone, and it probably is, but there is an enormous amount of propaganda surrounding Iran, particularly the dissident movement in general, MEK in particular. And it's on purpose. It's very similar to what the Chinese communists do. The reign of terror, which you should get used to calling it that. The reign of terror is not only a supporter of terrorism, it's a supporter of Orwellian type doublespeek. Where they just, how about we just say lying? And their biggest enemy, well, we're going to begin with Alireza Jafarzadeh, who you know from watching my show. He's been on the podcast. He's been on every one of the shows. He is the deputy director for legislative affairs, or deputy director in general.
Well, the deputy director for the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran.
So just so you understand, and I know that gets a little confusing. Took me a year to figure it out. I've been working with him now since 2008 or 2009. Yes. So we're getting into our 15th or 16th year. So I used to get it a little confused. The core organization, we'll talk about its history a little bit, is MEK. And the overall organization, NCRI, includes other organizations of similar view with regard to reclaiming the government of Iran and making it a democratic, fair government. And it also gives you more international ability to communicate through the National Council of Resistance to Iran.
Right.
NCRI. Okay. And MEK, you've got to pronounce that for sure. So you get
right.
Mujahideen al-Khalq.
Mujahideen al-Khalq.
Al-Khalq.
Which means the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, and the National Council of Resistance of Iran is actually the parliament in exile, headquartered in Paris, but has offices in various capitals in Europe and also in the United States, where we are right across from the White House. And the MEK is basically as a large structure inside Iran, but also have an organized force in a facility known as Ashraf 3 in Albania. And so the combination of the two, one, the resistance inside the country that has an organized force confronting the Revolutionary Guards and the regime, with a tremendous history of opposing both the Shah's dictatorship and the theocracy of the mullahs. And then you have the parliament in exile to make sure that everything is portrayed outside of the country.
Necessarily, when you're involved in something like this, your focus is on what you oppose. And you oppose dictatorships, and you oppose corrupt governments, and you oppose governments that take advantage of the people. And that would fit both the Shah, his father, him, and the two Ayatollahs. The two Ayatollahs may be at the level of world shocking, and the Ayatollah and the Shah is just the way I look at it, just a cheap dictator. Not cheap in terms of the money he stole,
right?
But cheap in the way he acted.
Absolutely,
and certainly not someone worthy of returning in any way with his son and his cohorts that unfortunately were a group of thieves. I mean, they took a lot of money and stole it from the Iranian people.
Well, Mayor, you mentioned that. Obviously, the people of Iran have gone through a lot of ups and downs. We have a tremendous history of culture and
Let's talk about. We're going to hit these points that people should know. Maybe some people don't know this. Of course, originally it was Persia. It's an ancient, one of the earliest countries, earliest locations on the globe, not too far from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that technically considered the beginning of civilization. There's a lot of dispute about that. And one of the ways I remember ancient history, it sort of spread out from the Tigris and Euphrates. So you're right near there, as is Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Israel, all the nations we're talking about. The world, as far as we've been able to record it and understand it, sort of began there.
Actually, the civilization that, as we know today, and Iran has been for about over 2,500 years of history, and everyone knows about Cyrus the Great, who actually was the first to introduce principles for human rights, for religious tolerance, which wasn't heard of in those years. Later on, they discovered what is now known as the Silas cylinder, that were orders by Cyrus that talked about how to treat others, other religions, how to be tolerant, and the principles of human rights. And that's the kind of tradition that the people of Iran are so committed to, that kind of a culture and political freedoms and tolerance. What the mullahs today represent is exactly the opposite of our history and our culture. And before that, what some of the, the more recent, you mentioned the Shah, the Pahlavi dynasty, they were also exactly opposite to Cyrus the Great, because they weren't about tolerance. They actually created a dictatorship and Savak secret police of the Shah, putting intellectuals in jail, and single party rule. That's why what we are so proud of is that how the Iranian nation actually fought for freedom all throughout these years. When they had obstacles, they removed it, and they fought for it. And that's why the Iranian nation stands very tall and proud of both the history, but also the way they stood up to preserve those foundational principles
that were passed on to civilization in general. I mean, it's Persia. Look at a group of nations, and Persia is one of the big contributors to the civilization that we have.
Science, literature, you name it. Medicine.
In fact, the religion before Shia was Zoroastrian, that had a kind of scientific basis to it, as well as a belief in God. But it was a religion that it wouldn't be considered modern science, but it was dedicated to the concept of science, studying in order to learn and understand more and more of the universe. It was I would describe it as for an ancient religion, it was an intelligent ancient religion. It was one that kind of did what the Greeks did. They saw the human being as a intellectual creature, and the more you learned, the more successful you were going to be.
Exactly.
So sometimes people think it was one of those like crazy pagan religions. Just the opposite.
Right.
It was great literature, a great concept, and then there was the major conversion to the Shia Muslim religion, probably in the 7th or 8th century, right?
Right. But it wasn't what you see today in Iran, that, the Shia religion, which is a, religion of a majority of the people in Iran, is actually based on the principle of, political freedoms, political understanding, religious tolerance, and actually a lot to do with education and encouraging science and all of those things. Debates was one of the very foundational things of the Shia leaders, or imams, what they call. But what we've seen since the mullahs took over, they have actually gone exactly the opposite.
They've become ignorant. I always thought that, and I'm an outsider, so I think I can say this, and please, those who are Sunni, don't get angry at me, because there are a lot more of you than there are Shia. But I always thought that Shia was somewhat more of a branch of the religion where there was more scholarship. There was more would you call them imams, or
Right.
where the imams
12
are kind of like in the Jewish religion, the rabbi, the students, the synagogue students.
The imams were
studied.
actually descendants of the Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
And each of them had their own, role and specifics. But, like, for instance, talking about education, the sixth Shia, the Imam Sadeh, was actually known for having all kinds of different schools, all dedicated to education, how to learn how to debate in a very healthy way.
Astronomy.
And astronomy.
Astronomy was a very
things.
big study.
Exactly. So that, I mean, you look at the history of our country, both in terms of religious point of view, but the whole culture, all of that, you see them in sharp contrast what you see today in Iran. These mullahs came out of nowhere. They brought this backward ideology that roots in feudalism and fascism, and wrapped it under the cover of religion and portraying it around the world, trying to expand it, which has nothing to do with the background of the religion, nor the background and the history of the country of Iran.
No, they did. They operate in that sense, even though they theoretically a belief in God. They operate like communists and Nazis operate. They bend the truth to them, and they really try to wipe out your history and make it their own. They don't want you to think as a Persian. They don't want you to think of Persian history anymore than they want the Chinese to think as Chinese. They want you to think as someone who is dedicated to their particular version of their religion, which magnifies them as the great leaders.
And they do all of
like
these
they're
things.
speaking for God.
Exactly. They do all of that under the cover of God. And that's the best justification they have found to use at any repression, any killings, any mentality of fascism.
It's
or
so
the way
similar.
they say this is all a religion, and they build like laws, like they call it Sharia law. None of them have any foundations in the history of the religion or the history of the country.
So the two Ayatollahs together,
Right.
and since one ran into the other, it's hard to separate them. When they
Yes.
actually separate, they have to be on the list for killing more of their own people than just about anybody on earth. The only one I can think of that may be more would be Xi Jinping, but it isn't so much the ones he killed. He inherited large numbers that Mao killed. They think they may have killed anywhere between 70 and numbers are ridiculous, and 100 million Chinese. But the Ayatollah is probably the Ayatollahs are probably in the 15, 20 million.
Actually, one thing is the population, sending children to the minefields during the Iran
Population, by the way, is 90 million.
Right. The population of the country is 90 million. I mean, a lot of people have gotten killed as a result of the rule of the mullahs, including many people, close to 1 million killed and maimed during the Iran-Iraq war. But when you're talking about political repression, 120,000 people have been executed by the regime for their political beliefs. Think about that.
Well,
120,000 one
because-
by one picked up by the regime.
So then I
executed.
will say we might as well make that number about 150 million, because if it says 120 million, we can document.
120,000, I mean.
120,000. Okay.
Right.
All right. So now let's take a look at. We're going to skip a lot of history, and then the Ottoman Empire and the divisions that were done after the First and Second World War, and because the Shah and the Pahlavi family, these are not an ancient. I don't think. I mean, you know better than I do, but I don't think of them. They're pretty much a modern creation as a royal family, aren't they?
Well, the
last century.
Pahlavi dynasty, there are only two of them. One was Reza Shah that came to power. Interestingly, in 1925, he declared himself as a new king of Iran. But a few years 4 or 5 years before that, he was installed as a military,
That's the
commander.
father. That's the grandfather.
The grandfather, exactly, by the
His
Russians.
His name was
Reza Khan, Reza Pahlavi, the grandfather.
Reza Pahlavi.
Right.
So this is Reza Pahlavi Jr., the kid.
Yeah, well,
They don't
exactly.
use Junior, but
The,
so I can call him Junior if I want.
the grandson of Reza Khan, who became they declared himself the
He's like a
king.
junior.
He was actually installed by the Russians at the time, and then he ruled. But then the World War II came.
Well, if I calculated correctly, and this is why I find it so strange that they accuse you guys of being communists, and the people who accuse you of being communists are mostly communists. You should know that in the State Department, but and you're not. But if he was appointed by Russia, he was appointed by the Soviet Union.
Right. He
That
was
during the
appointed
Soviet
by the
dictatorship.
the Kazakh. He was a Kazakh commander for the Russian.
When? What year?
That was in 2021.
So it had to be Lenin or Stalin.
Yes, around that time, exactly. And then during the World War II, he was removed because he was too close to Hitler. And the Brits actually removed him and put his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as the new king of Iran. So, and then in 1952, 53, there was a nationalistic movement in Iran.
He was there during the Second World War.
Yes,
the second
World
Shah?
War. Yes, but right around that time he was removed,
And who
by
removed-
the Brits. Britain.
Well,
Britain removed
Britain,
him because he was too close to Hitler, and then they put his son.
Until
Mohammad Reza
recent
Pahlavi.
times, Britain of the European and Western nation had the most control over, and it got even more graspy when oil was discovered.
Especially because the oil was
Once
discovered.
oil was discovered, I mean,
Right.
in many ways, it's part of the great wealth of
Right.
Iran. It's probably a curse.
Exactly. And that got a lot of people's interest, and they wanted to install
Well, I've read
their
that
own
somewhere,
people.
so
and-
that is an original.
Exactly, and that's how Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became the king. And then the people overthrew him, just pushed him out of the power because the nationalistic government, Dr. Mossadegh, was in place, had the popular support.
So he was in
democratic
office
elected.
about 7 or 8 years during the war, maybe 9 years. Then he was started in the early 50s, right?
You mean Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the
Yeah,
son?
Pahlavi too.
Pahlavi too, yes. He ruled from 1941
Right.
Until he was overthrown. But in 1953, he escaped the country, and because the whole population were against him. And then
Didn't he leave?
He left the country, escaped basically,
He
and
ran
then
away. He turned tail.
turned tail, and then the cooperation of Britain and the United States, coup d'etat was formed, and then he was put back in 1953, back in place. So this whole dynasty of Pahlavi took power 3 times, all 3 times by a coup d'etat.
And they've been thrown out twice.
And thrown out twice. And then the last one was the 1979 revolution, which actually turned out to be a very popular revolution because people were just entirely fed up with the Savak.
Yeah, you know, it turned to the Ayatollah so quickly that people don't remember that it was a multifaceted revolution, and that the Ayatollah, you have to give him credit for this, he outfoxed everybody and played a deception game. He was going to come back and just be kind of a religious leader and go to Qom, pray for everybody. And from the moment he got back, he had organized for some time in advance in all of the different cities, clerical groups for him.
Actually, I think
Isn't that right?
Khomeini, who became the first supreme leader of the regime, had to really thank Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah, because what happened, he was in exile in Iraq for many years.
Didn't he have a chance to kill him at one point? I remember
I have no idea.
Yeah,
but the fact that there was really no reason to kill him because he was doing nothing.
There was a time that the Savak came to him, and they had an opportunity to take him out.
Right, but he was sent to exile
he decided that it would be that he was a pretty harmless character.
Yes,
and that it wouldn't be right.
Actually, what the Shah did when he was in power, He went after intellectuals, labeled them as, Marxist, communist. That in those years, that was a big justification to get rid of your opposition.
That was his trading card.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the reason it said that we put him back. We felt that he would be more of an opponent to the Soviets. But, that era of the CIA, you honestly don't know what to believe. You don't know why they really put him back. Did they put him back for corrupt? I mean, we have to also say that he was a major crook. He stole enormous amounts of money from the people of Iran. And he let his ministers, they were like princes. They stole an enormous amount of money. So you had an Iran with a brutal leader who had one of the most feared secret police in the world, Savak, a prison, the Evin prison, which was just bombed.
Right.
People getting tortured, and money getting taken out in the who knows what. And people have been fed up with it for some time. And they had gotten rid of him, and he was reimposed on them by the CIA.
Right. And at that time, what the Shah did, he tried to get rid of intellectuals, those who were criticizing him. So he put them in jail or executed them. But he opened doors for the clerics because they were using the mosque to praise the Shah. And the Shah was actually giving money to expand the mosque. And he created the Sabak, secret police Sabak, that went after intellectuals. And then he declared a single party rule. And you think, it's only the Ayatollahs that say the only party is party of God. No,
right.
Before that, it was the Shah.
Right.
And he said this party which was named basically after him, by him, he said, you either are a member of this party or you go to jail or get your passport and leave the country for good. That didn't play well with the Iranian population. And that's really led to the 1979 revolution.
But it had been boiling for some time.
It was boiling
for a revolution
for years.
Almost from the time he came back.
Right. The revolution was piling up. The events were shaping up. But what happened was that when the revolution was in their last stages, there was a vacuum of leadership, because those who were involved in the uprisings and that led to the revolution were already either killed by the Shah or were in Shah's jails. The only network that existed that was intact was the mosque. And that's when Khomeini smelled the situation, took advantage, and he went from Najaf in Iraq to near Paris, Neufchâteau, near Paris, only 4 months before the revolution succeeded. And within 4 months, he portrayed himself as the leader.
Why did he do that? Because a lot of people thought he was exiled. He was self-exiled.
No, he was exiled by the Shah.
Yeah.
Expelled from Iran into.
But he wasn't living in Paris most of the time.
Only just 4 months he lived in Paris. 4 months before the revolution, he went from Najaf to France, and then he landed in Iran. In that 4 months, he made all the promises that he's going to be like a religious person. He's going to go back to Qum theological schools, and then when the revolution succeeded. The first thing he did, just very rapidly went after intellectuals.
So the groups involved in the overthrow, which really was about a 7 or 8 or 9 year process, right?
Well, it was several years of process, but what really was the last year that you saw, protest after protest.
Yes, I
so that was the real momentum of the revolution. And everybody really was opposed to the Shah's dictatorship, and they wanted to get rid of him. And Khomeini saw that. He didn't talk about any divisions, none of that. As soon as he took power, he went after the first enemy that he went after was the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK.
Well, it's also very typical of the way dictators, communists, and Nazis in particular take over. They usually need allies to take over.
Right.
But the people they kill first when they come into office are the allies.
Are the ones.
Then they kill the other people.
Yes.
But the allies are the biggest danger to them. So they had, if I recall correctly, about 3 or 4 major groups that were involved in overthrowing the Shah, of which the religious group was just there. It didn't play like a big role, but they were there. And it was MEK, and there were 2 other groups.
Yeah, there were there was another group called Fedayeen.
Right,
and-
Fedayeen,
and- yes,
of course, right.
and also the bazaar,
Right.
that played a big role. Those were the merchants.
Right.
They played a big role. The students played a big role. I mean, different sectors of society played their own role during the revolution. But right after the Khomeini took over, he tried to consolidate everything under his
So
own
give us
control.
the time. The Shah goes out approximately when?
The Shah goes out in December, late December of 1979
And there's
and
still,
78, and
there's still the thought
right.
that he might come back at that point.
Well, it was pretty clear that it's over, and then
And then
on
you had,
February
you had
11,
an interim government for a while.
yes, there were several prime ministers that he changed, Shah, before he fell, several of them, but the very last one was almost very clear that he's not going to last very long and the game is over. So as soon as Khomeini took over, he installed a government, a provisional government that were of people in suit and tie, that, there were almost no clerics in the first administration, because he wanted to take advantage of everybody to see how to run the show, but also have the opportunity to purge all the ones who were opposed to the
So
to Khomeini.
through the clerics,
Right.
he had not maybe the whole country, but he probably had the biggest network throughout the entire country because he had it built in.
Right. Well, the mosque
mosque.
was everywhere. It was
Were they all loyal
expanded.
to him? There were other ayatollahs who were considered more scholarly than him, and
There were
and
many
holier,
more,
and
and-
holier than him.
Right.
He
and-
was considered somewhat of a scoundrel
Actually,
among
there
ayatollahs.
were other
an
ayatollahs,
operator.
others who were a lot more prominent than Khomeini was, had a larger following in different parts of the country, and they were true fighters against the Shah. Like Ayatollah Talaqani was a very, very prominent cleric who was jailed by the Shah many times. He had a very secular ideas and very, open-minded. And what Khomeini did, the first thing he did is just going after those who were challenging him in different ways. In a very suspicious way, Talaqani died within about a year, less than a year after the revolution. No one knows exactly how he died. He was, by the way, very close to the MEK, and that was a big reason. Perhaps the mullahs, definitely didn't like him at all.
Can I make a guess how he died? Well, so the Shah comes in approximately how much time does it take for Shah's thrown out, Ayatollah comes in a few months, right?
Well, almost right away. I mean, Shah left, and within
By February, I think.
February 11th, actually, 79, Khomeini came to power, and then his main task was to consolidate power
And he was
and purge everybody.
And basically, you could say that the street made him the supreme leader. They orchestrated a nationwide demand that he be the supreme leader and that it be a religious republic.
Well, he basically imposed himself on the thing because of that vacuum of leadership. Plus, he wasn't really known. There was no words, nothing about him. And he also, the media played a big role at the time. I remember like CBS and other major television were doing interviews with him. And he was an unknown figure that, claimed that he's a holy man. But it took the MEK actually to try to expose him from early on.
Well,
that they started educating the public.
When did the MEK, because the MEK, like the other groups, everybody was working with him originally. Then why did they break from him?
Well, they never really worked with him because Khomeini was always very suspicious.
But his group.
But the point is that during the revolution, everybody who was opposed to the Shah, they all worked together with the goal of getting rid of the Shah. And Khomeini was in no place to exert the kind of things he did at the time. But in the early days, Khomeini asked the MEK to participate in the government. And he sent his son repeatedly asking the MEK to collaborate with Khomeini to.
And who was the head of the MEK now at this point?
It was actually, several leaders. They had Masoud Rajavi, Musa Khiabani, and others were the leaders of the MEK.
I thought maybe
Right.
Rajavi was the leader at this
Yes,
point.
yes,
He was
he was.
one of 2 or 3 leaders.
Obviously the most prominent person. And then Khomeini sent, repeatedly telling them, okay, you can have a free hand to operate. You have to do 2 things. First, endorse Khomeini as the leader, which the MEK never did that. Second, we want you to go after the people who are opposed to the government. You go after the communists. And the MEK said that, we thought the revolution is about freedom of thought and tolerance.
Right.
You're going to start that, and then this whole thing is going to expand. We will not agree to go after our countrymen just because we have a totally different point of view about them. So they refrained from participating in the repression.
Is that where the false statement comes about the MEK was entirely communist? Because there was a communist movement going on, but you opposed it?
Actually, the whole label that was used against the MEK came at the time of the Shah.
Right.
When the Shah arrested the leaders of the MEK.
Well, he tried to make everybody a communist because that's what got him back in office. Right?
Yes.
I mean, we and Britain put him back because for some reason, well, at least we claimed that he'd be a bigger threat against the communists than Mossadegh. But I don't really believe that because he wasn't a strong leader.
Well, the Shah wanted to basically consolidate power. So he coined the term Islamic Marxist and used it against the MEK so he can justify executing them. All of the founders of the MEK were executed by the Shah.
And the West would feel a little more comfortable about it.
Right.
Well, we're going to take a short break.
Right.
And we'll be right back. And we'll get up to the present.
Okay.
U.S. Army Major Scott Smiley paid a high price serving our nation. Scott was leading his platoon in Iraq when a blast sent shrapnel through his eyes, leaving him blind and temporarily paralyzed. Scott would become the first blind active duty military officer before medically retiring years later. Thanks to friends like you, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation gave Scott and his family a mortgage-free, specially adapted smart home. Show your support for America's heroes now. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org. Here we are, pretty much at the beginning of the process here at this pristine, I call it a laboratory. It's not like a factory, it's like a hospital. This is the beginning of the process for roasting. Deep grain, very good quality. Most people don't use this quality. We deal with small farmers because they like to know who we're dealing with. They give us the highest quality, all organic, non-GMO. You should know all Arabica beans, no Robusto, all Arabica. They're going to go into the roaster and it'll get roasted for about 20 minutes or so. Oh my goodness, look at these. My goodness. You're going to want to specially order these. This is what goes into Rudy's coffee.
Are you ready for some action?
I'm ready for action.
Get the Elite TV plan only through the portal. 218 channels, and it's only $69.95 a month,
Wow.
including your free portal.
That's cheaper than everyone else.
Your favorite sports, movies, news,
Wow.
even daytime dramas. We're talking about ESPN, OAN, Newsmax,
Wow.
channels you can't get anymore in certain areas.
Compared to the competition, this is a way better deal.
Endless selection. Not to mention all the free music channels. There's over 700 premium and classic movies all ready to go.
Wow.
Plus, they got catch-up TV that allows you to go back and watch what you've missed or want to watch again. Cut your cable in half and get twice as much for free.
Way more channels for half the cost. cost.
After the first year, the subscription then drops to $57.95 monthly, where you change or upgrade anytime. Go to QUXNow.com and get yours today. Use promo code RUDY. Act fast. These deals are selling out.
This is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. And I have with me Alireza, my good friend, and we've sort of set the background for how this unfortunate situation occurred, and the Ayatollah, who really fooled a lot of people with regard to his motives. Don't think he fooled the MEK leadership, though. They were opposed to him from the very, very beginning as an extremist, I think. But in any event, they became his principal opposition because, first of all, I think he did away with most of the whatever else there was. He did away with. He did away with his clerical opposition, of which there was a good deal, right? There was. I remember at the time there was real disputes among Muslim scholars that he wasn't of the educated or intellectual quality to be a grand ayatollah. He was the grand ayatollah, right?
Khamenei, that was the case.
Yeah.
In the case of Khamenei, the successor
The new one.
to Khomeini,
Well, he's even worse.
he didn't have any of the credentials.
Right.
But for Khomeini himself, he did have the credentials, but he wasn't the number one. There were other
Right.
more senior clerics. He basically overpowered them by just trying to, sheer force and just put them in jail. And the number two person, and perhaps the number one cleric, Ayatollah Shariat Madari, had a lot of popular support. He put him in jail. He forced him to come on television and confess in collaborating with others, and just got rid of him. So Khomeini used the tactic of repression, silencing, and forcing, imposing himself on others. When it came to the religious circles, but when it came to the MEK wouldn't buy any of those things.
Well, when they took the hostages, which was right away, why did they do that? Why did they want to so quickly make an enemy of the United States?
Well, the issue of the hostage taking, taking 52 Americans hostage for 444 days, has several purposes. Number one, he could rally all of his forces around anti-Americanism because he made that very central, and that would allow him to justify everything.
And they saw America as the prop for the Shah.
Because use that saying that it was the Shah, it was the United States that backed the Shah, and now they have to pay the price.
And at that time, Nixon was the president, and Nixon did have a fairly close relationship with the Shah. I don't think the other presidents
the time of Carter that the embassy takeover took place.
Right.
But Nixon, they blame Nixon because he had a big, strong relationship with the Shah. Now, what happened, the other reason that embassy takeover was beneficial for the mullahs is that they could get rid of the first government that Khomeini had put installed. The Prime Minister, Mehdi Bazagan, who was a liberal person with suit and tie, he resigned that same evening. So Khomeini got rid of all of them.
Did he kill his
own? They didn't kill him, but they sidelined him. So he could justify that and put more clerics, people closer to him. And then that was a big justification to go after the MEK, asking the MEK, why don't you do the same thing as I'm saying? So they were calling the embassy, they call it the spy network, net of spies, U.S. embassy, and then Khomeini labeled the MEK as the nest of spies number 2. So telling the population that the MEK is either the lackey of the United States or they're not helping us in going against the United States, because the message of the MEK from day one was that the most important element we need to focus on is the political freedoms.
When did he start killing MEK members? Right away?
He started actually pretty much weeks after he came to power, but all of that was done in an unofficial way. You had these Hezbollah people that had the ban over their head, that they would attack the gatherings and offices of the MEK, killing them. portraying it as though it's the public against the MEK, but it was all orchestrated by the regime. But officially, when the killing started, it was June 20, 1981. That's the last day that the MEK realized that, let's do one last push. And then they brought about 500,000 people into the public who called for ending the torture, ending the theocracy and all of that.
Right.
And then on that same evening,
Were they
Khomeini
arrested?
he ordered opening fire on the demonstrators. About 50 people were killed on the spot, but they arrested thousands. And from the same evening, execution of those they had arrested started. Some of it without even identifying who they were. They just knew that this young girl, like 13, 14, 16.
And how many
was
of them
present.
how many of those people were MEK members?
All of them.
All of them. Okay.
Right. And that's why the reign of repression actually started from June 20, 1981, that has continued to date. And the MEK had two choices: either submit to Khomeini and say, okay, we accept your leadership and we'll collaborate with you and all of that, or be prepared to pay the price and get a lot of its members killed, but establish a very important principle that the Ayatollah Khomeini does not represent our nation, does not represent our religion, that is not going to be a way of life, that making it normal. So they paid it.
And that you've been consistent with, and that's also cost you well over 100,000 lives.
Exactly.
Well, they at some point pretty quickly, although there were 3 or 4 leaders of MEK, what did they? It became just Rajavi. What happened to the others?
Well,
were they in prison right away, or were they killed?
What happened was that the regime went after the entirety of the movement, and they wanted to get rid of everybody. They killed the number 2 person, and then the successor to that, and they were purging. They were looking everywhere. Anyone from the MEK they could find or suspect, they would attack and try to kill them, including actually my best friend in high school. His name was Ali Ghafouri. We were in high school together in Iran I was at the time of the Shah in Mashhad, and we were good friends. And then after the revolution, he went to a different university in Iran, and I went to the United States, and we stayed in contact. Later on, I found out that Ali Ghafouri and his wife Batul and their 1-year-old daughter were all killed. The regime suspected
killed or executed?
Killed by the Revolutionary Guards. The guards attacked their house. They killed on the spot Ali, and then they killed their 1-year-old daughter and Nasreen, and then the wife was arrested and sent under torture, and they wanted her to confess and give details about the other people, which she refused, and they executed her when she was pregnant. So that's the story of those who actually stood up against the Ayatollahs and paid the price, never collaborated with them.
So he takes over in 79. He's got 444 days of hostage crisis. Then he releases them on the day that Reagan was
took office. Yes.
And then a few years later, he attacks the Marine barracks, kills how many soldiers?
243.
Yeah, it was a large number of deaths, and all the while he's trying to thin out the ranks of MEK as the opposition group that remain the most consistently opposed to them, and trying to malign them as terrorists. They're no more terrorists than Benjamin Franklin was a terrorist, or that
George Washington.
I think was that
definition of the Ayatollahs.
The Boston Tea Party was an act of vandalism,
right?
Because this guy was murdering people left and right. I remember a cartoon very early on, where you see an ugly picture of the Ayatollah, and there's I don't know what newspaper, but there's a blood all over us. He's holding his hands up like this. There's blood coming down from his hands. And someone said, they blamed it on Carter. This is what Carter gave us, because because he'd accepted him. And so now we'll move fast forward, because now you have the first Ayatollah. You have the war between Iran and Iraq, which was caused by what? I mean, it seemed like a strange war. It seems to me it never moved more than about 100 feet or maybe 100 miles. It was right on the border.
Well, of course, the war broke out in September 1980, and many believe that it was the plan of the Ayatollahs to lure Iraq to invade Iran, attacking Iran. That's how it started. In any terms, it was Iraq and the dispute was about the river, that divides the two countries, Shatt al-Arab. And then, and at that time, when the war broke out, of course, the MEK participated in the war in fighting the Iraqis to push them back, because they had invaded the country at the time. And the MEK at the time was still doing open political activities. It was way before the June 20, 1981 repression. But that war actually turned out to become a major tool for the mullahs as part of their larger strategy of what they called export of revolution,
right?
Leading to the formation of all these proxy groups in the region. That became a major part of the strategy of the regime of, creating, trying to dominate other countries. He said that the goal of the Iran-Iraq war is to liberate Jerusalem via Karbala. Now, Karbala is one of the two holiest cities and that's Iraq.
In Iraq.
So he wanted to liberate Karbala in order to go to Jerusalem, and the ultimate goal was there. So that's how he justified all of that.
So their chant that we're now familiar with on Friday afternoon in Tehran is death to the U.S., death to Israel, and death to the MEK. When did that start?
Actually, that's an important point you just raised. That started actually in the very early days after the revolution, especially after the embassy takeover. It was only a few months after the revolution. Now, there is a reason behind those slogans, and it was a very calculated slogan that has continued to date. Number one, by chanting death to America, they created a big cover to justify everything under that cover. Because by declaring the United States as what they call the great Satan, as the enemy, anything else you do against your own population is justified, because you're saying we're fighting
another
the great Satan.
Communist.
They labeled anybody they wanted to get rid of. They attacked them. They took away all the freedoms and all of that. Second, by chanting death to Israel, that created a justification for everything they were doing outside of Iran, the proxy war, their war in Iraq, as I just said, describing the war in Iraq as the goal was liberating Jerusalem via Karbala. And the Quds Force, actually, which is the main organization created by the IRGC, was named actually as Quds Force because, that's where all the proxy groups are. So Israel was an important target that would justify building your infrastructure of these proxy groups from Lebanon to, extending it everywhere. And then the third element, the MEK, became so important because that was the most important domestic enemy for the Ayatollahs, because the MEK undermined the religious authority of the mullahs. It had a tremendous structure and organization in the country. It was very appealing to the younger generation, very appealing to women, because women played a huge role within the MEK as opposed to the misogyny of the mullahs. Since 1989 until now, the 9 consecutive secretaries general of the MEK have all been women. And think about it, in Iran, under the mullahs, you can't even run for president if you are a female. There's not a single female judge in Iran because that's banned. So these are like major things that the regime wanted. That was the reason they were focusing on the MEK, and they have continued to date, because the more unpopular the regime gets, the more concerned they are inside Iran about the impact of the MEK.
So then Iran established over the years, as we move ahead into the 80s and 90s, a really massive infiltration network all around the world to infiltrate public opinion. Because given the level of terrorism that they participate in, and then just very, very absent-mindedly, people will say they're the biggest state sponsor of terrorism, as if that's some kind of an award. And it turns out that that they now engage in terrorist acts all through the 80s, including the killing of the soldiers and bombings and other things. And then they have another major attack on the MEK, don't they, in the 80s?
Actually, the regime waged war on the MEK. So, once they were able to do public activities in Iran, they went after them, and then they went after their bases that they were outside of Iran also, if they could find. They became the main target of terrorism by the Iranian regime. Anywhere outside of the country, they went after the representatives of the movement. But most importantly, as you mentioned, a huge demonization campaign was waged against the MEK, because whatever the regime was doing to eliminate them wasn't working. They killed so many of their members, it didn't work. In 1988, Khomeini, who was alive at the time, the first supreme leader of the regime, issued a religious decree, a fatwa. It's a very small, handwritten, one paragraph, saying anyone who is in any way associated with the MEK must be killed. It doesn't matter what you have done or haven't done. So they brought every single political prisoner and asked them one question: what's your affiliation and what's your connection to the MEK? Anything affirmative would send them down the hallways and for executions. And as many as 30,000 political prisoners
during that one period of time.
During that period of about 4 months, in 88. It started in about August until about 4 months after that, and and the regime hoped that this way, like, they can uproot them. And not only that didn't work, but all the information, all of that was done in secret. All the information is spilled outside because the successor designate to Khomeini, a senior Ayatollah, found out about it and spilled the bean and talked about it, took out a position, and created big chaos there. Now, a lot more details came out later, and the UN just recently had a report detailing all those mass execution of the MEK, describing it as crimes against humanity.
The UN is enormously favorable to Iran. It's like one of their favorite members. They put them on the Human Rights Commission. How many people have they killed?
And despite all of that, Mayor,
they don't have freedom of religion. They don't have freedom for a woman. If a woman shows a little bit of a hair, they kill her. If God forbid she's raped, they either imprison her or kill her. I mean, they're brutal.
And that's why I think whatever the regime has done has failed in terms of eliminating them. So they spend a huge amount of money and resources and hiring people under different covers to attack the MEK, because the regime feels that if they're not able to do it, this is the force that's going to act as the engine for change in Iran. And though that demonization campaign has continued ever since.
Well, until last week, I would say that most of what America has done against the regime of terror has been feckless to positively stupid. Carter couldn't do anything about the hostages except lose a helicopter in the desert. And it took Reagan to get them back. Clinton paid no real attention to them. I guess he was doing other things in the White House, not paying attention to something as important as Iran. because they were doing a lot of killing during that period of time and growing. And all of a sudden, they have almost I wouldn't call it an empire, but they put together Iran through all the problems in Syria, Assad in Syria. They get control of Hezbollah, which gives them a lot of control of Lebanon. And right after the Iraq war, you and I know they were really in control of Iraq, not America.
Right.
Because they were killing MEK people then that were left behind there. So during that period of time, we let them grow into a monster. With I used to describe it as they sort of had consolidated all the northern part of the Middle East, and the southern part of the Middle East were their enemies: Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Israel, Jordan. But their goal has always been to take over the entire Muslim world, whether they're Shia or Sunni or wherever the heck they are. And the ones they don't agree with, they just kill.
You know, Mayor, the problem of that actually led to this is that there has been an appeasement policy pursued by the United States and Western nations over 3 decades. And that policy of appeasement led to the expansion of the Iranian regime,
right,
but also allowed them to develop nuclear weapons. Let me tell you a few words about how their nuclear weapons program actually got to what it is now. You know, in August of 2002, we revealed a nuclear site in Natanz, which is the main uranium enrichment facility, that triggered the IAEA inspections of Iranian nuclear sites. Then we had several other press conferences right here in Washington showing other sites that were involved with weaponization.
And when did you do that? You did that in 2000 and...
In August of 2002, so let's here in Washington.
Let's just put the map up for a moment. And we can show them on the map. So I'm just going to make it approximate. It's about right. Is it south of Qom?
Yes, way south, right. You see where the Natanz is just below, a little bit far, below Esfahan, actually, right there. Yeah. And
Esfahan is right nearby. It's close to, Esfahan is close to, is it not?
Yeah, just go further down a little bit. Yeah,
so they're like in this area here.
Right. And then actually the other side, Iraq, that you saw there.
And Fordo is near there too.
Fordo is near Qom, actually, south of Qom, that we exposed in December 2005. And you would expect, Mayor, with all these revelations we did, that the world would act on it.
No. In fact, you know, all the details of this are horrendous. But the Clinton administration sold you out, much like they sold out Israel, but Arafat wouldn't take the deal. He was making too much money. They sold you out and declared you a terrorist organization in order to gain favor with the new moderate government of Iran, which they were too stupid to see through. That moderate was a joke. There's nothing moderate of the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah is the supreme leader. As we can tell, he's not moderate. I mean, the guy got himself bombed because he wouldn't agree to stop the nuclear program. I mean, I'm surprised he even agreed to the ceasefire.
Exactly. And, you know, this policy of appeasement has actually led to the advancement of the nuclear weapons program of the Iran regime.
Of course it has.
It led to the expansion of their terror operations in the region.
You know, if you compare it, the famous policy of appeasement is Chamberlain with Hitler. So then there are a lot of similarities. Like Hitler basically condemned the West and announced his intention he can take it over.
Yes.
And although he didn't make a big deal about it, if you look carefully in Mein Kampf, and you could see he wanted to eliminate the Jewish people.
Right.
I don't think people really bought into that then. They thought it was just one of his political gripes that he was going to do what he did. But Churchill was warning people for years, we better do something about that. We better do something about that. Well, we didn't. We made a deal with him much like Obama did with the nuclear arms deal. And then here's what I do not understand the justification for this at all. I believe that in the last 8 or 9 years, we're the country that supplied the most money to them. I don't think China and Russia have given them anywhere near the amount of money. If you put together what Obama was giving them in cash, all the sanctions that they were lifting, and the money that had been seized, not from them, but from the Shah, stolen money that should go back to the Iranian people.
Not the mullahs.
The mullahs, please explain to people, the mullahs are not some kind of monks, you know, praying all day. They're a bunch of, I consider them very similar to mafia capos.
Adding to that, mafia, in addition to, fascists under the cover of religion. And adding to whatever you're saying, Mayor, is just, the legitimization of the nuclear weapons program of the regime under different covers is actually allowed them to get this far.
But they still lie about it, though. They still say it's for peaceful use of nuclear power. It's such a joke. I mean, you only need 3% for the peaceful. They're at 60%. There's no nation.
You don't build such installations all over the country.
We don't build missiles either.
The cost of the nuclear program of Iran has been $2 trillion. That's $2,000 billion, which is twice as much as the cost of the 8 years of Iran-Iraq war. And all of that for what purpose? And, right now there's only one nuclear reactor in Iran, in Bushehr, that wouldn't supply even 1% of the power that is needed in Iran.
Right.
So what is this whole thing about? This is not about nuclear energy.
The whole thing is that they believe Israel has nuclear weapons. They are serious about wanting to eliminate the state of Israel. And they're not going to be able to do it so long as Israel has nuclear weapons and they don't. Israel hasn't used their nuclear weapons. And they also have tactical nuclear weapons that over the years have a more confined, the Middle East, they've always said that you can't use nuclear weapons. It's so small, they're going to kill you as well as them. We're getting close to, you can use weapons that don't have that same impact. Or if you look at the bunker buster bombs, they're almost as effective as nuclear weapons, but they don't have the toxic effect.
Right.
So they don't want to be in a position where they've got to face Israel without having nuclear weapons.
Actually, for the mullahs, the nuclear weapons program is a guarantee for their survival.
Yes.
They're rejected by their own population. They have lost much of the clout they had in the region, all these proxies and everything. They're facing a crisis of survival. And that's why they're resorting more and more in keeping their nuclear weapons program. And at the same time, they're vehemently opposed to the MEK. Why? Because they see the MEK as the one who exposed, all of these major nuclear sites that created the crisis. That there were sanctions at the UN, and all the pressure has come to the bear, and that's why they feel like this is the time that either they stand up to the outside world, or the whole thing is going to crumble.
Now, so then we get into the period of time with Obama, and it seems to me that's where they get really powerful, because let's go backwards. Biden, bare minimum, handed them over $100 billion.
Absolutely, at least, yes.
When I remember when Donald Trump first came into office, he hadn't put any new sanctions on. No new sanctions yet. Within 2 months, they were starving because he was enforcing the sanctions that Biden never enforced. Right. Now, the money we calculate is money that he officially loosened up. So if whatever amount of money that we say Obama gave him, he probably gave him twice that amount. But here's the part that I find completely astounding, and he got away with it. Until he got caught, we don't know how often he did it, he was sending jet planes there to give him cash in the middle of the night. How do you get away with that? That's money laundering.
Yes.
With a guy who was the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. So what percentage of his budget or if that money we gave him, how much of that went to Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and Assad?
Well,
About
let me
half?
put it this way, Mayor. I can assure you, not even $1 of that money went to the people of Iran.
Of course not.
okay? The money was spent either making the Revolutionary Guards fat and more rich and more resourceful,
And he's very rich.
or which or provided to their proxies. These proxies are very expensive.
Yeah, and
The weaponry, the training, the salaries, and all. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah said that everything we have, including our underwear, comes from Iran. He said, if Iran has money, we have money. And that's a reality on the ground. So that's why the people of Iran were so opposed to this policy of the mullahs of investing the money outside of the country. And that's why I think because of the change of circumstances, the regime has never been so weak now. They are feeling so desperate. And I feel that the prospect for change and ending all of the miseries in the region and globally is there. And the people of Iran and the Iran resistance have never asked for boots on the ground, nor appropriation of money.
So let's talk about, we
Sure.
talk about the history of MEK. Let's talk about what MEK has become, because it's become a very, very strong worldwide organization. It has unusually diverse bipartisan support in the House and Senate, because I've been at 20 of your meetings, would you say 25, 30? And it's about the only place I get to talk to Democrats.
Actually, this is interesting you said, Mayor, because this issue that the MEK is focusing on, and the NCRI and our leader, Mrs. Mariam Rajabi, she actually introduced a platform that is both the guideline for now, but also the way we
10
see
points.
for the future of Iran, known as the 10-point platform for the future of Iran, that relies on the ballot box as the sole criteria for legitimacy, separation of religion and state, gender equality, freedom of religion, free market economy, peace in the Middle East, and a non-nuclear republic form of the government. That proposal, that agenda has gotten tremendous support, not just among the Iranians, but also outside of Iran. In the US Congress, you mentioned there's bipartisan support. 228 members of the House just recently
almost seems to me
endorsed this.
That given all of the major events that you've had, the historic role that you played in uncovering the nuclear program, who knows if to this day if we know about it in the depth that we know about it. And I won't ask you to comment on this, but the various other things that you've done with Mossad and others to disrupt the program, it almost seems there's a concerted effort to ignore you in the United States with the media. You've got a few, Fox, Newsmax, but by and large, the New York Times, you don't exist as far as they're concerned.
Well, Mayor, one of the big challenges over the years, as I mentioned about the policy of appeasement, part and parcel of that policy has been to demonize the movement. In order to justify them reaching out to the mullahs, they have to say there is no alternative. There's nobody out there. Those who are opposing the mullahs are either irrelevant or too small, or they're troublesome.
Right.
This way it justifies, okay, let's reach out to whoever we know is in power. Let's search for some moderate elements within the regime. That justified all of these years of approaching the Ayatollahs, giving them cash, giving them money and all of that. I think, and at the same time, the money that the regime spends in spreading lies and hiring people in the United States, that some of them getting them into working at the State Department, Iranians, people on the payroll of Tehran working at the State Department, at the DOD, and other places. So that's the real issue behind all of that.
For a country of their size, they have per capita even more influence than China, and they exercise it as indirect and conniving a way as China does. because no matter what we've done, and I'm talking about all the people that work with you, Republican and Democrat, who are some of the most famous people in America and the world. You should be getting publicity way beyond what you get. And we always get the same reporters from Fox, from now Newsmax, a couple of the other stations, and nobody else will do a. Here you are, the group that uncovered the nuclear material. You're a group they're killing all the time. I remember, and then when they do write articles, they write articles like, "You're a communist group." Now, you weren't a communist group. You're not one now for sure. And if you were one 48 years ago, I don't know, Menachem Begin was a terrorist, and he turned out to be a great prime minister.
The MEK was never a communist,
But
was never a terrorist, was never a
It's
cult.
a ridiculous charge.
This is all meant to justify, when the 1997, you mentioned during the Clinton administration, designation of the MEK came. The next day, New York, Los Angeles Times did a story about that designation. And they wrote that newly added to the list was the MEK. And he said, one senior Clinton administration official said that the inclusion of the MEK on the FTO list was meant as a goodwill gesture to Tehran and its newly elected moderate president, Mohammad Khatami. This is the actual exact quote, I remember it. This was meant as a justification to reach out to the mullahs. And that policy, it's not about us. It's about like trying to reach out to the mullahs. That policy has backfired.
And that was
the mullahs.
He lives in his own mind and in his own world, Bill Clinton. I mean, he's the same guy that offered Arafat everything he wanted, and Arafat told him to go to hell. I mean, he blew 8 years of strategy. He was going to get the Nobel Peace Prize for ending the situation in Israel, and what he got was a punch in the nose.
That mentality of appeasement is in Washington, and they're in different parts, different institutions. That's a big challenge that needs to be overcome, not because of us, but I think it's a much bigger issue. If you want to end the rule of the mullahs, if you want to end the threat, the nuclear terrorism, and the export of revolution, the so-called revolution of the mullahs, you need to see the people of Iran and the organized resistance be able to do their responsibility to end the rule of the clerics. And we're not talking about, overthrowing the mullahs Iraqi style. We're not talking about foreign boots on the ground or appropriation of money to the country. We have always opposed that. We're saying the people of Iran have everything in their hands to do it. We have gone through all of that. We paid the price. Just don't help our enemy. Don't give him cash. Don't give him all the
they don't properly describe to people your role in one of the most important things that happened here. Otherwise, we might have a nuclear Iran. The discovery of it, the recent discovery of the enhancement that's been going on in the desert, that is significantly greater than we ever thought, and proves beyond any doubt that they're developing weapons. One of the excuses for that is the excuse for the uranium is they need the peaceful use of, but they have more oil and gas they're ever going to need. They don't have to import, and they don't use it. They have two reactors. One doesn't work, and the other one they don't work. They don't use it.
Iran has the second largest oil and gas reserves combined in the world. Yet the oil and gas industry of Iran is one of the most underdeveloped industries in the whole country.
Right.
All of the money is put on the so-called nuclear energy, which in fact is trying to, building the bomb. That's why, I think now with everything that is now known to the world, everybody has to focus on the solution. How are we going to end, this cycle of all the threats that the regime is making? And the solution does not lie in sending troops, does not lie in temporary solutions here and there, blocking one path and the other for a few months, few weeks. The solution lies in the hands of the people of Iran, overthrowing the mullahs on their own. All they're asking is for recognizing their right to overthrow the regime, recognizing the right of those resistance units of the MEK, that they have, thousands of them in Iran, in
Right.
all 31 provinces, recognize the right to confront the Revolutionary Guards, then you will see what an impact it will have in the whole region.
So now we come right up to date. And over the last, well, since October 7, right, of 2023,
Right.
this whole thing has changed because even though Biden never had the guts to hold Iran responsible, the whole world knew that Iran organized that attack through Hamas, funded it, helped to train them. And I think Iran made a serious strategic error. I think they thought they were strong enough to crush Israel, and that if they, I remember at the beginning of the war, they said if they could open a two-front war against Israel, and the United States stayed out, Israel might not be able to withstand it. Watching the way in which they're conducting the war, they're not much of a military nation, nor are they a nation where they're great at public relations intelligence. Their military intelligence stinks. Example, they're getting pounded by Israel. Well, we're getting pounded by Israel. The bunker buster bombs took out the nuclear things, but Israel has taken out just about their entire leadership, except for the Ayatollah. They've taken out their nuclear scientists, who they're going to have to count on to rebuild. So if they say it's going to take 3 years, probably going to take 6, because these are the people, the key people. And what they should have been doing is using the missiles they have, which aren't unlimited, but they've got a lot, to take out Israel's military capacity, which exists almost unharmed. A few soldiers killed, one plane. So if they ever start up the war again, they've lost at least half of their military equipment. Israel has it all. And the last couple of days they were fighting. That's how Israel got in trouble. They did one last one. They were really wiping out key installations. And Israel went for the key installations as opposed to the population. So it's not, I think it happens to people that are that irrational and that are that zealous. Rationality doesn't work for them. And to conduct a war properly, you have to be rational. It wasn't a rational plan. Did we do enough damage, though? So when I see that some people are estimating we only sent them back 3 months, I don't believe that. And if that's coming out of us, that's coming out of they got spies up the you-know-what. What about those 3 people that were in the Biden administration? The guy they had to suspend and take his...
Right. Rob Malley.
Robert Malley. Yeah, he's the guy who negotiated the traitorous agreement. But then all of a sudden it turns out he's been turning information over to our enemies. And because he's a Biden person, he's still walking around. So let's look at the map now. Because it's getting low and we're going to have to, we only got 10% left here on the map. And we're almost near the end. And what I wanted to do is have you help us understand where these places are in Iran. So there's Iran. You can all see it right there. Okay? Maybe you put a C in here, Ted, for the very end. So there's Iran. The capital is strangely placed, not in the center.
Yes.
But in the north central, right?
Right.
So it's over here.
Right.
Right below it is Qom. That's the holy city, right?
That's where Fordo is. This is the site that they have centrifuges under the mountains. And
well, it seems in that area,
yes,
they have a couple. They have Fordo. They have Natanz. They also
and then they have new facilities. Actually, Natanz is further lower, and they have new facilities that we discovered and exposed in in our press conferences since December 2024 until now.
You were
They
on the
are
show.
all in the Semnan province, which is right to the east of Tehran. Right, exactly there. You do a circle right there.
About right here, right?
Yes. And right east of Tehran, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
Semnan province.
Now, that's
okay?
pretty much a desert, right?
It's 60% of Semnan is actually desert.
And it's not
okay?
very heavily populated.
It's not very heavily populated, but it's one of maybe the 5th largest province of the country.
And then they have
most ideal for this kind of
And
purposes.
then they have about 5 or 6 very sensitive facilities with different levels of access. Some you can get no access.
Actually, about 10% of the entire Semnan province is off limits to the ordinary people. Only military people with special access. 27% of that province is like semi-limited, and so that the regime has heavily invested there. They're saying we have a satellite program to send, satellite into the orbit. But in fact, that's exactly that's part of their missile nuclear warhead.
They intend to attack Mars.
Right. And here's actually the map, like you can see here.
Okay, that's the map of the
right. That's the Semnan province. That whole border in blue is the Semnan province. That side, the number 3, actually, the number 3 is actually where the launch pad from the city of Semnan, near the city of Semnan, where they're working on building nuclear warheads. The number 4 is actually another site known as Shahrud. They say they're launching a satellite for putting satellite into orbit. And then number 1 and 2 are the new ones that we recently exposed. All of them are part and parcel of the new plan that is we discovered is the code name Kavir plan, which is the new.
Israel took out one. Israel took out about 4 of them before we took out the small ones. I don't know how much damage they did, but they believe they've taken them out. At least they have to be reconstructed.
Well, the important thing about the nuclear weapons program of the regime is that to know, first of all, they're all controlled by the Revolutionary Guards. There's nothing civil about it. They have kept them secret until we exposed it, or some others exposed it.
And we mean the MEK.
Right, meaning the MEK network on the ground.
We should get a medal.
And then,
right,
we got our.
We should get a medal.
Yes. Well, our medal
We're
was.
We're going to give them a medal. We're going to have a ceremony, and we'll have Madame Rajavi and Farzine. You've got one heck of a group, by the way, of extraordinarily dedicated people. I'm sorry that I didn't have Dr. Maria on. I've never seen her so moved as when she met with the women.
Right.
As a woman, you got to feel something extra about the horrible things they do to women.
Right.
I've never understood the left wing going easy on Iran, who are supposedly feminists.
Right.
What they do to women is disgraceful.
Right.
And there is more than symbolic importance to the fact that the group is headed by a great woman. And I've worked with Madame Rajavi when her people were in jeopardy of being killed because of the delays of the Obama administration, and particularly of Hillary Clinton. And her heart was breaking. But she didn't lose composure. And she's ready to be a leader. She is a leader.
Well, Mrs. Raju has played
she's been through hell.
Significant role in bringing a whole generation of not just women, but men, young generation, to remain so focused on the goal of freedom in Iran. Because when the mullahs kill people and hang them in public, it's not just meant to kill that person. They want to kill the whole spirit of the society, make them feel impotent, and just basically give up. With all the repression, her goal, her movement has been basically to show the light, to continue the struggle over the years, to build even more momentum out of that. And by bringing a generation of women into the leadership of the movement, so she has sent a strong message to the mullahs that the core of the ideology of the mullahs is actually misogyny. And here it is, not by accident, the leading force fighting the mullahs is actually a movement that is led by women. And that's very telling about
And it really is. This is
the nature of the fight that is out there.
We'll put Dr. Marie on next week and ask her this, but that isn't symbolic. That's real.
Right.
These women are extraordinarily strong, and they're ready to fight, and have.
Well, they have been fighters over
They've
the
been
years.
trained. A lot of them. Maria was really shocked at how the training they have.
Right.
So I want to get to. We got to conclude in about 10 minutes. So I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to where we are right now. So Israel has done a great deal of damage to the personnel, leadership, economy. What the United States did, they're trying to minimize and saying it only set them back 2 or 3 months. Don't believe that. You're not rebuilding that mountain in 2. I mean, yes, they can redo it, but I would say bare minimum 2 years. And it's going to cost you $1 trillion. That's expensive, what they did there. Very expensive. And they're going to have to build them somehow in a more secure way. But by that time, we'll have a bomb that goes down further. So, plus their economy is in terrible shape. Their supporters, I mean, they don't have proxies on one end anymore to fight for them. So anything that happens is going to go right back to them. Anything happens, they're going to get attacked again. Number two, on the other hand, they don't have sponsors anymore. Russia's got enough to just take care of itself. And China's economy is the worst it's been since anybody can remember. And I think China's given up on them. Russia hasn't, but I think China only likes winners. I mean, China wants to be the leading power in the world. You're not going to get there by having a basket case like Iran to take care of. So I have to confess, I was a little disappointed that we did a ceasefire this quickly. I was hoping for more destruction of the infrastructure, because I think the more destruction, the better chance for regime change, because the pressure is off a little bit now. But has enough been done so that regime change can happen internally with some pushing from outside?
Well, actually, Mayor, I mean, you have your own views, but our leader, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, she actually welcomed the ceasefire.
I know she did. She's a very, very good woman.
The peace as proposed by President Trump, because she said that that actually removed the 2 obstacles for change. One was appeasement, and the other one was war. Now is the time to focus on the 3rd option, which is bringing about change by the people of Iran. This is the 3rd option, is what she has proposed for 3 decades. Actually, 21 years ago, around this time, she appeared before the European Parliament and said that your policy of appeasement will lead to war. There is a 3rd option. And she appeared again just a week before that, last week, before the European Parliament, saying that now is the chance for everyone to really focus on that. Well, now, the reason I say it is that because at the end of the day, change will come in the hands of the people of Iran, number one. Second, this regime has already been so weakened as a result of the protests inside the country. Since 2018, there have been rounds of major uprisings engulfing all 31 provinces of the country. They have lost their clout in the region.
That was all the way back 7 years ago.
Right, exactly, since 2018. Yeah. And then people are just fed up with the whole situation. One of the main chants during the uprising that started in 2018 was that death to the oppressor, be it the Shah or the supreme leader. So the people want to move forward, not backward. They want to see change. And, we have never relied on the outside world to just do the job, never expected them to do it. All we were saying to the outside world, whether it's Europe, the United States, that don't help our enemies. Don't give them money, don't give them cash, don't give them legitimacy. Don't let them get away with their terror and all of those things.
Obama and Biden's Democrat America gave them the money. And I defy someone to tell me who has given Iran more money than that. China has it. Russia has it. Nothing like that. Not $100 billion. That's more money than. I mean,
And plus, even worse, that maybe
that's
adding
way
to the
more money
money,
than we've given to Israel.
they also gave them legitimacy. Who legitimized the nuclear weapons program of Iran? The JCPOA in 2015 basically allowed the regime to have at least 1,000 centrifuges under the mountains in Fordo, and allow the whole enrichment program. All of that were legitimized by the 2015 nuclear deal. These are the kind of measures that it certainly doesn't help the people of Iran, but it doesn't help the peace and security in the region. It doesn't help any of these countries, and we paid a big price for it because as a result of every concession, we were getting the wrong end of it, and we were being harmed, and our hands were getting tied in order to bring about change. So all we're saying is that stop blocking the people of Iran in bringing about change.
Okay, but we have to take into account that in the last 4 years, they had the unlimited ability to put anybody in America they wanted, because Biden was engaged in, I can only conclude, a treasonous program to have America invaded by any terrorist, any pervert, any killer that wanted to come in. There was nothing stopping it. And we couldn't check their backgrounds because somebody comes in from Iran, Iran's not going to give us their background, or Venezuela, or so there is a great concern that there are sleeper cells. And whereas even back in 2000 and 2001, when we were attacked, Bernie Kerik and I immediately knew it was bin Laden, and it was, he was threatening to attack us for 3 years, and Bill Clinton, was on the telephone paying attention to other things, if you get my meaning. I think that Bill Clinton doesn't get a proper analysis of his role in September 11 happening. I believe if we had a Ronald Reagan there, or a Donald Trump, or maybe even a George Bush, it wouldn't have happened, because he would have been, when he took out the coal, he would have been hit the way Trump hit him. That's an American vessel of war. It's under international law an act of war. When they took out our vessels, they declared war on us. But in any event, also, they have no compunction about killing people in other countries. They've done it. They were going to kill the ambassador from Saudi Arabia in Washington, D.C. They're going to kill you in Arizona.
Right.
And they were going to kill me in Albania with Madame Rajavi. They're going to take out the New Year's celebration.
Right.
And then they were going to kill who knows how many.
Right.
That was the last big celebration we had, wasn't it? The last big meeting.
Right.
And then COVID came on.
Right after that was also the big rally in Paris where you were there, and Mrs. Rajavi was the keynote speaker.
Right.
And Iranian regime diplomat, Ayatollah Asadi, was arrested when he had brought a very powerful bomb from Iran personally.
And plans.
And delivered it to people to take it to France to detonate it. And just, minutes before the event, all of them were arrested. They found the bomb. The Asadi was put on trial and sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. The first time an Iranian diplomat was sentenced to that. And guess what happened? After a few years, he was sent back to Iran.
I guess
in
Mrs.
exchange
Macron,
for some hostages that Tehran arrested from Belgian nationals. So
did Macron use an auto pen for that, or did he? Well, also, the attack in Albania was very similar. They had a diplomat involved in that too, which I thought
the whole embassy was behind it. That's why the Albanian government shut down the Iranian embassy, because the ambassador, the whole operation there was involved in facilitating the plot, and that's why I think it's so important to put an end to all of that.
Of course. And you cannot just discount the fact that they are probably or possibly involved in one or both of the attempted assassination attempts on the man they probably fear and hate the most. No one's done the kind of damage to them that Donald Trump has done.
Actually, Supreme Leader Khamenei's own website, as we speak, it still has a video clip emulating that the targeting of President Trump. So clearly, the regime has made it very clear what their agenda is over the years.
Right.
Has made it very clear how they operate, and also has made it very clear what they see as their threat. And I think now is the time for the world to stop saying, okay, this is normal, it's been like that, it's going to continue.
Right.
No, that has to be stopped. And there is a possibility, there is a solution to it, there is
and there's an organization
and movement, yes,
that has been tested for years, that has a plan that is completely consistent with our values and our Constitution and the Constitution of the Western world. And it's a group that's been put through hell and survived. We've never been in a situation where we can do a regime change with as much confidence that the government will be in good hands during the transition. And that's all they're asking for. They're asking to be able to have an orderly transition of about half a year so you could get to elections. And please realize that this is a well-educated country. It has been for centuries a well-educated country. All you have to do is take a look at the people who came to America from Iraq and the success that they've had, from Iran, and the success that they've had. So you're dealing with a very strong and good population. Could be a great asset. It also will unlock peace in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia will now be free to make the deal that it wants to make with Israel, but they're afraid their street is going to go crazy, and that Iran will activate that, and they will. So this has been.
You mentioned the transition, Mayor. Mrs. Rajavi has made it very clear that our fight, despite the huge price that this movement has paid, it's not about taking over power at any cost. She said,
well, you'd have to know her to know that. I can assure you of that is not the case.
Right. And one thing she made it very clear is that we have a clear plan for the transition. And this is not something we put together just, last year
from the time you had
from
this
20 some years ago. That
from the time I met you.
Transition has been there, that after the fall of the Ayatollahs, there is going to be a provisional government. The role of Mrs. Rajavi actually to lead the transition, to make sure that within 6 months, we've committed to that, there's going to be free and fair elections that would lead to the formation of a National and Constituent Assembly. And then the responsibility of the NCRI will be over. The role of the National and Constituent Assembly is to set up a provisional government for the remaining period, draft the Constitution, put it to the referendum and the vote of the public, and then within 2 years, you complete the whole process of transition, that you will have a truly representative government for the people of Iran. That would be based on the vote of the people,
right?
Not like the Shah that said, I have a better gene, I rule, or not like the Ayatollahs who nobody elected them, and the supreme leader has been there forever. And that's why I think that kind of an Iran is very doable, approachable. It doesn't require any money or resources of the foreign nations, specifically the United States. And but it will have a huge impact.
It would have an amazing
region,
impact,
if not globally.
Among other things, it will create a road to peace in the Middle East. It'll be a significant blow to Russia and China that have banked a lot on the regime of terror because it fits them so well. And I've got to get ready for my show, and this will be available hopefully on tomorrow, and we're going to do a few more of these.
I want to thank you,
We're going to do
Mayor.
a few more of these so we educate the American people, because it's really been what you've done, what you have available, what you can do has been deliberately suppressed and deliberately mischaracterized in a way that could not have been done in the decent America I grew up in. But we've become a corrupt country, and we have to change that.
Yourself, you're not only proven to be a fighter all your life, but you're a great educator.
Well, thank you.
And the role you're playing is so crucial not just for the American public, but I think everybody around the world
Well, thank you.
is benefiting that. And I want to thank you myself
Well, as I
for
told
everything you have done and you continue to do.
as I tell Madam Rajali every time I see her, and Farazine, it has been one of the highlights of my life to be involved with you people. I've never met such brave people. I've never met people that give you an internal understanding of how important your freedom is, which we as Americans can often take for granted. But all you have to do is meet with any one of them and have them tell you the story of their child that was killed, or their husband that was killed, or their parents that were tortured, or it's prolific. Well,
thank you so much.
thank you very,
Appreciate
very
it.
much. If you have any questions, just text them to us. You know, we're on every night at 7 to 8 on Lindell Television, and then we're on X and Rumble and Getter and Facebook and Instagram and everything else imaginable. And if Trump would get some kind of a live feed on that Truth Social thing, we'll go on there too. So we're going to sign off now because, believe it or not, I'm going to go right over and do America's the Rudy Giuliani show. And I want to thank you very, very much for listening. I want to thank my guest, my good friend Alireza, who did, of course, a magnificent job and has devoted his life to bringing about freedom for his people. You can't devote your life to anything much better than that. God bless you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And God bless America and bring us through this. It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense.